I'm pleased to introduce my guest today, world-renowned author, movie producer, and resident historian for Disney, Mr. David Bosser. Welcome, David.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start by talking about the two most important characters in our story today. How did Salvador Dalí and Walt Disney end up meeting?
Well, Dalí was working at the Warner Brothers Studios on an Alfred Hitchcock film called Spellbound, and Jack Warner, who ran the studio, had a party one weekend in August of 1945, and Walt was a guest along with Dalí and others, and that's where they first met.
And that friendship eventually became an idea. That idea became a contract, and Salvador Dalí, starting in 1946, worked at Disney Studios. Talk a little bit about that working relationship.
Absolutely. So Dalí did sign a contract with Disney, and he came to work at the Burbank studio. And when he first arrived, he was looking for the project he wanted to do. It wasn't just, Destino. He didn't just come in and say, we're doing Destino. It was literally coming in and playing around with some ideas.
So the destiny of love, the subject of poets and authors for centuries, becomes this beautiful film called Destino. Talk about how that ended up becoming the title for the film and the importance of that love ballad.
So Walt was always on the hunt for material for the studio. And so he had purchased a number of songs from a Mexican composer. And he had Ray Gilbert, a lyricist, write the English lyrics to the song. And Dalí happened to see that song and was fascinated with destiny. And because it was my destiny of love, he immediately gravitated to it. And that was really the beginning of the Destino story.
Dalí ended up creating nearly 200 works of art for this project, but the film was not released in the 40s. Instead, it ended up being shelved and stored in the vaults at Disney for a long time. Talk a little bit about why the project wasn't completed.
Oftentimes at Disney, projects get developed, and they get developed to a certain point before they're shelved, or what we say, put in the morgue. The morgue is where all the artwork at the studio goes to, and it's now known as the Animation Research Library. But back then, it was in the basement of the Ink and Paint building. Dalí had worked diligently on this project with several other Disney artists, and at some point, they just decided to shelve the project, and a lot of it had to do with the pressure Walt was under financially.
The work for the film remained in the Disney archives until 1999, when you and Roy Disney were working on Fantasia 2000, and Roy decided that it was time for this film to be shared with the world. Talk about your initial conversations with Roy about the project.
Well, Fantasia 2000 was very much like a Fantasia movie, a packaged picture. It had interstitials between the different segments. One of those interstitials was the Disney that never was. Those projects that were developed but stopped for some reason. Destino was one of those. And Roy really wanted to show some of the Salvador Dalí artwork during that segment.
The art that Dalí created for the film was in the Animation Research Library alongside the film for decades, but there was a scandal that unfolded.
That's right, John. Back in 1969, an employee of the Disney Studios actually stole some of the Destino artwork. He, in turn, sold it to an art dealer. That art dealer tried to get Dalí to sign some of the pieces that Dalí hadn't signed already. And Dalí called John Hench at the studio to ask if the studio was selling the art. John said, no, it's in the morgue, the Animation Research Library. And so John went down the hall to see the artwork, and sure enough, it was missing. At that point, the police got involved, and there was a number of lawsuits that followed.
The good news is the art was recovered.
That's right.
Roy really was the catalyst for getting the art released to the world, and that had to be exciting for you as someone intimately involved with the project.
Absolutely. I mean, Roy was the driving force to finish Destino, and then really the driving force to put it out into the world. And I think that's hugely important to showcase a piece of animation that is art for art's sake.
Destino was nominated for an Academy Award, and I want to talk a little bit about that night, because if there had been Vegas odds laid on who was going to win, Destino would have had them.
You're always elated when you get nominated for something, and Destino was nominated for an Academy Award. But the Academy is always full of surprises, and there's a lot of people voting. We thought we were going to win, and we didn't. We went out into the lobby after the show and trying to figure out what we were going to do, and Roy's wife at the time, Patty, said, let's go to In-N-Out Burger. And so that's what we did. We hopped in the limo, we went to In-N-Out Burger, we got a box of burgers and fries, and we went back to their house in Toluca Lake and sat around their dining room table drinking red wine and eating burgers and fries and talking and having fun and lots of laughs until about 2 in the morning.
Talk a little bit about Destino in the context of Roy Disney's legacy.
So Destino to me is, as I've said before, art for art's sake. This is a beautiful, moving painting that tells a story. And it's also part of Roy's family history. It was his uncle who brought in Salvador Dalí in 1946 to work on this project. And it was a legacy piece. In no other terms, it was a legacy film that Roy had to complete.
There you have it. Disney, Walt Disney, synonymous with wonder, excitement, innovation, and creativity. And Salvador Dalí, the surrealist master. Two of the great creative genius minds of all time. And now, because of Park West's partnership with Disney, you have the ability to own a piece of movie magic and art history.